Greetings, folks. Welcome. I'm Steve Clemens, editor-at-large of The Hill. Thanks so much for joining us for the second of our three-part series called The Road to Zero-Emission Trucks. It's a big deal. The focus today is on manufacturing of these trucks. We'll be taking a look at the future of electric trucks and manufacturing initiatives and incentives needed to achieve net zero emissions by 2050. Before we begin, I'd like to thank our sponsor, the Environmental Defense Fund, for supporting today's event. We're going to spend the next hour looking at policy initiatives that could move the needle on a number of fronts. Will trucks be built domestically? Where can these jobs be created? Are they really making a difference in our emissions? And the biggest question of all is, can the United States compete with foreign manufacturers on this track, so to speak? While plummeting battery prices and increased battery power are making EV trucks more affordable, the United States is really lagging behind in the race to make these vehicles and the batteries that go in them. Could the administration's proposed infrastructure plan pave the way forward for domestic production of electric trucks? Before we bring up our fantastic lineup of speakers to answer these questions and more, I've got a few housekeeping notes. First, you can tweet us at The Hill Events, so at The Hill Events, but more importantly is the hashtag The Hill E-Trucks. That's The Hill E-Trucks. We're broadcasting live and we'll be taking your questions throughout the program. As with any live stream, you could experience occasional trouble, like I usually do with the video. Refreshing the page should fix the problem. I hope it works for you. We're kicking the program off with Jack Allen, the chairman and CEO of Proterra. Proterra designs and manufactures electric buses, electric charging systems, high-powered batteries, and software heavy-duty vehicles. And we've got the exactly right guy to talk to us today about this. Jack has spent over 30 years in the commercial truck industry, and we're delighted to have him with us today. Jack, great to meet you virtually online to learn more about this deep dive in truck. You know, when I first sort of heard this, and we talked to the Environmental Defense Fund about this sector, you know, a lot of people talk about cars, autos, but you know, trucks are a huge deal in the life of commerce in this country, the life of trade and export. And while we're talking about the transition today and what's needed to do it, you know, given your long experience in trucks, can you just tell our audience how vital a transition in the trucking sector would be, both to our emissions, but why we have to get this right? I've got you on mute. We're going to have Jack Allen. We have some muting problems, folks. 1, 2, 3. Well, we have lost Jack Allen sound. So let me just say as a preamble, Jack Allen knows more about the trucking world. Oh, there we hear. I hear Jack Allen now. Jack, go ahead.
Yes. Hey, Steve, this is Jack Allen.
Great.
Sorry about that.
No
like
worries.
You said, there's always the risk of technical
Just push
difficulty.
refresh the page and all will be well.
Right. It's great to be here. Thank you. So, you know, it's certainly, as you mentioned, commerce, you know, in the United States, transportation is so vital to that. You know, the vehicles that are on the road today have made great improvements in diesel emissions over the years. But the next frontier here is to move to zero emissions. And, you know, I happen to believe that this market is at an incredible inflection point, and the commercial vehicle market is ready to move towards electrification. You know, a company like Proterra, I mean, our mission is to develop EV technology to advance the world's best commercial vehicles. That's all we do is EV technology, and we've been doing it for years. We built our first transit vehicle over 10 years ago. And, you know, we're off and running. We're an established company. You know, the theme of this is manufacturing. We have manufacturing sites in place today building battery systems in Burlingame, California, and in Los Angeles. We build transit buses today in South Carolina and in Los Angeles. So we're committed to convert the commercial vehicle industry to electrification.
Well, look, let me ask you a question, Jack, and you know, it may be out of left field, and tell me if it is so. But I look at this challenge of electrified trucks, electrified vehicles, and the emissions targets we have that we need to meet as you know, kind of along the lines of a national security issue. And so I hang out with Pentagon people, and they do simulations. And as you do a simulation, as you must do as a CEO of a publicly traded big company in this area, where are the strategic deficits? Where are the concerns you have in us making this transition? You know, sometimes, you know, when you talk to folks in the private marketplace, they can't do it all alone. There needs to be some parts of this that are met by government partnership and government investment. How do you get this right? I want to give our audience an understanding that gravity alone can't just take us there. We have to have some partnerships in this process.
Yeah, so you bring up a great point here. I'm a firm believer that the starting point to convert commercial vehicles to electrification starts with infrastructure. And if you just think about that intuitively, how can a fleet make a conversion from diesel to electrification in any mass manner unless they're confident that they're going to have, charging and infrastructure available when they need it? Because downtime is just, it's the death of the commercial vehicle industry. So to me, one of the first places from a policy and a government standpoint would be a public-private partnership to really kickstart charging infrastructure in this country at the scale needed to convert commercial vehicles, so that when the fleets are ready to go and the battery technology is ready to go and the commercial vehicle manufacturers are ready to go, the charging is in place. I think that's the first place to start. I think a second place to start is on the supply base. Today, 75% of our transit vehicle is sourced here in North America, but that can go up, and it goes up with demand, it goes up with volume, so that domestic suppliers can see the opportunity to make investments in the commercial vehicle electrification space. There's a policy in place today that the ATVM policy is out there. It provides low-cost capital to invest in light-duty zero emissions. If we could expand that to heavy-duty, it would apply to companies like us. It would also apply to our supply base, and even would apply to battery cell manufacturers that today, for the commercial vehicle industry, all those cells are made foreign, and we really need those cells to be made here in North America, creating jobs and protecting our supply base. I think those are just a few things that could really kickstart the transition to electric commercial vehicles.
I did not know that about the battery production and the external dependencies. And as you know, we've coming out of this era where supply chain dependencies have become so much a part of the conversation. I'm sure I will raise this with Congresswoman Dingell in a moment. But I know that your company has teamed up. I think it's with, is it Roush Clean Tech? Am I saying that correctly? Roush Clean Tech and Penske Truck Leasing. All around this next generation Ford F-650. I've heard you've got some news on this.
Yeah. So today we announced really our 9th commercial vehicle partnership, and this is where we provide the battery system technology to a commercial vehicle manufacturer or an engineering integration company like Roush to allow them to rapidly electrify their commercial vehicles. So today we have partnerships with companies like Daimler on delivery vehicles and school buses, with Komatsu on construction equipment. We have 8 of them in total, and then as of today, with Roush and Penske as our partners, we've announced our 9th one.
What do we need to do on the manufacturing side of this that we're not doing? Are there, how do I put it, human capital needs, training? Are there pieces of this when it comes to jobs and that dimension that we could expand, or that we have to consider as we're thinking about, bolstering our manufacturing ability, across the EV set, but particularly within trucking?
Yeah, so these are great jobs. The jobs we have today, we have over 700 people that work at Proterra, either putting together battery systems or transit buses. These are skilled labor. These are jobs that start at $20+ per hour, that have 401k matching and health care. And in our company, we even provide stock options to all of our employees. So these are great jobs. It takes some training, obviously, to convert the employee from whatever industry they're coming out of. And the government's been very good about helping us with that training. But more of that is necessary to ramp up the EV commercial vehicle world.
Jack, we're taking questions in the audience, and I got a question from Andrew Johnston, who's Mobility and Analytics Growth Co-Lead, he probably knows about this stuff, from Guidehouse. And he asked, what's your vision for an e-fleet friendly corridors, which is an interesting answer, which is really talking about the broader set of infrastructure. A truck is not a truck without charging station, without corridors. So I'm trying to, in my own mind, begin thinking about what does the map and the footprint of all this look like. Maybe you could take us on a journey and describe that for us.
Yeah, that's really a great question, because where EV is starting today in transit buses and school buses and even in delivery vehicles, it's a little bit easier from an infrastructure standpoint, because the vehicles leave in the morning, they come back at night, and they get charged in a centralized depot. The challenge is what Andrew described, when you have a vehicle now that needs charging while they're en route. So that can be a over-the-road vehicle that's going from Cleveland to Charlotte, for example, and that's the infrastructure that we need to work on. And I do believe the way to start this is to pick 4 or 5 highly traveled routes across this country, and to focus the infrastructure in those. So say like I-5 from Seattle all the way down to Southern California. If we could electrify that route, I think that's a great place to start.
Now, you were at Navistar for, I don't know, a couple decades, I'm guessing right now. And let me just ask you a tough question. Now you're Proterra and seems very modern. But when you compare that world to, say, your peer in China, or your peer perhaps in, a Scandinavian country, is the U.S. well set up, or are we behind? I mean, that was one of the questions I asked at the beginning of this. How do we rank up? And we don't have to lead in everything, but maybe in this area we do. And I'm just wondering what you think the key elements of competition are that we need to be aware of.
We certainly need to catch up in this area. And the reason is that as other countries move to electrify faster, their supply base gets larger. Their supply base has the economies of scale. They have access to the technologies that our supply base doesn't have. And then we just fall farther behind. So, we're, believe strongly in the Biden administration's infrastructure plan. We think there's a number of elements in there, both on the private side as well as on the public side, that can really help us accelerate faster, create jobs here, put the supply base here, and that's driven by demand. It has to be driven by vehicle demand and by infrastructure demand, and the supply base and the manufacturing will come right along with it. The market's ready.
Yeah, and another part of this question, again, thinking about it strategically, I've been talking to a gentleman named, you may know, John Evans, who is the CEO of Lithium Americas, and they mine and bring lithium out of Nevada, but they're also, cover the Americas. But I'm kind of getting a short tutorial where Australia has a number of these sites, but around the world, whether it's in Africa and whatnot, China has gotten control or significant posture in a lot of these lithium. How important is the lithium race for us, and are we in the right place? Because I know that's such a key part, or I've been told it's such a key part of the electric vehicle side of this equation.
Well, certainly for the remainder of this decade, there's nothing from an ingredient standpoint more important than lithium in terms of the battery cell manufacturing. And you're right, China is strategically moved in many other countries to source and control the source of lithium. So we are behind, but it's not futile. There is a lot of opportunity for us to make big inroads in this area. We just have to do it now.
And let me just finally, Jack, I should know this, but where are you located? Where are your sites? Where are your workers in the United States?
So I'm sitting today in Burlingame, California, which is in the heart of Silicon Valley. And, that's where our company is headquartered. And it's really headquartered here because this is the innovation center of the United States when it comes to battery system engineering. If you want to design battery systems, come to Silicon Valley, because this is where all the action is. So we do our development here. We do some manufacturing here. But then also in Los Angeles, in the City of Industry, we have a brand new automated battery line where we take cells and we make battery packs, battery systems out of that. We also make transit vehicles there. And then in Greenville, South Carolina, we have our largest transit bus manufacturing facility there also.
Now, you've said, I know I said the last question, but with one more. You've actually commented, you said, in transit buses, that the market size is about 5,000, 6,000 a year. But you sort of scoffed at that in this comment I see here. You said that's such a small amount when you kind of look at the broader trucking industry. Just for our audience, what is the scale of what's achievable when you get to when we get to the point of a trucking sector transition?
Sure. Well, just to be careful, the transit market here is critically important to us, and we love this.
So I withdraw the word scoff.
Okay. So from a size standpoint, you're right. It's 5,000 to 6,000. There's 35,000 school buses sold in the United States and Canada every year. There's 100,000 Class 6, 7 vehicles like we just announced today with Roush and Penske, and then depending on the year, there's between 200,000 and 300,000 on-road vehicles, so Class 8 vehicles that are either going across the country in a sleeper or regional haul or concrete mixers or garbage trucks. So you can see if you go from a market of 5,000 up to, markets of hundreds of thousands of opportunity here just in the U.S. and Canada.
Well, Jack Allen, Chairman and CEO of Proterra, thank you for helping us to understand a little bit more of the dimensions of what's going on with e-trucks and zero-emission trucks. Thank you very much. We hope you'll come back and let us know how you do as we go down this road, so to speak.
Be happy to, Steve. Thanks for being with you and your audience today.
Thank you. Joining me now is Congresswoman Debbie Dingell from Michigan. Representative Dingell was elected to Congress after a 3-decade career with General Motors. She's a vocal advocate on Capitol Hill for the electrification of the transportation sector. She's also co-sponsor of a bill to expand manufacturing of advanced technology and zero-emission vehicles. I also want to make a personal comment that if you're fortunate enough to follow Debbie Dingell on Facebook, she writes a missive, I will call it, every day that is filled with soul and humanity, and it touches everything from workers and jobs to technology to what's going on in our homes. So, Congresswoman Dingell, it is a pleasure to see you.
Steve, it's great to be with you, and I was glad to listen to the tail end of Jack. I was in the chair until I got over here. But you don't have to go to Silicon Valley. You can come to Michigan. We've got the best research and R&D and engineers and scientists, and we're doing good work on battery development in Michigan.
Well, actually,
too.
so I want to tell our audience, Representative Dingell, that you were at General Motors for some 30 years, and now you're a member of the House of Representatives. You are somebody that sits at this nexus of knowing your constituents, knowing jobs and where they're going. And I have to tell you, God, who is the former president of Chrysler I met once? He was president of all the auto companies, Bob Lutz. I met him 30 years ago. And he said, I know he's still around, but I'm quoting, at that time 30 years ago, he said, we would never have EVs. We would never get batteries right. We couldn't do it. And he was very much stuck, in my opinion, in a very old frame about the auto industry. I'd like to hear from you about, as you said, we need to think about the future, not the past, but how when it comes to EV trucks, how when it comes to kind of these transitions, how well are we positioned?
Well, we've got to be at the forefront. One of the things that's really important about the legislation that we are considering right now, we've got people who, Mary Barra says that General Motors is going to be at 100% electric vehicles by the year 2035. Ford, the other manufacturers are moving in that direction. Some of the environmentalists want to mandate that number. People are talking about setting a target for 2030. We got to go there. The fact of the matter is global warming's real. If you've been in my district the last 3 weeks, we had a horrible flood, 7.5 inches in a few hours, and then it rained again on Friday, water up to past people's first floor windows. It's a nightmare. We've got to do something about global climate. So, and the transportation sector accounts for 30% of that. But I keep telling people that if we're going to get to electric vehicles, there are 3 buckets. One, they got to be affordable, which means the average consumer needs to be able to afford them. 2, we've got to develop a battery, which you were just talking about, that people are going to have confidence in, that is going to have the range We need to build it here in America. No more shipping jobs overseas. We need to be creating those jobs here in the United States of America. And we've got to be identifying and mining minerals that will be used here in a sustainable way so that we're not dependent upon China. And then 3, we've got to build out the infrastructure. We've got to get chargers across the country, and we got to upgrade our power grid by 50%.
Is it your sense we're moving the right direction in these ways? I mean, when I look at, when big transitions, as we're talking about e-trucks, part of it is human capital and part of it is capital. And you helped co-sponsor a bill that dealt with the capital part called, that you want the Department of Energy's Advanced Technology Vehicles Manufacturing Loan Program to include heavy-duty trucks. So, I mean, I just sort of look at that as a natural. Is that a hard lift to get, the Department of Energy to do that?
I mean, we got to get it through Congress. Congresswoman Julie Brownley and I introduced the Advanced Technology Vehicle Manufacturing Future Act, which would modernize and expand the ATVM loan program. So that we got to, we got to help manufacturers get to where they need to go to retool their plants and these auto factories. So this would assist them in making these advanced vehicles and the parts. So yes, but I hope we're going to get it through, and I hope it's going to be in the infrastructure bill. And let me tell you, I'm a very loud, insistent, laser-focused voice.
I know you are. You've also introduced the USA Electrify Forward Act. And I've talked to other members of your committee who've not only been supportive of this act, but also looked at how you partner it with communities that have been left behind, communities that have not been part of the development agenda in this country, often communities of color. And I'm just wondering whether or not there are real opportunities to rewire the social contract when we think about manufacturing and jobs and bringing it to parts of communities that have had a tough time. Is there, do these overlapping interests get you where you need in terms of getting things passed in Congress?
Okay, so that's a really complicated question. So I'm going to try to take you in different. Yeah. I keep going to my buckets because I'm working all of them right now. Yeah. First of all, USA Electrify Forward Act we need to do it. It would expand and it would bolster domestic manufacturing conversion grants, as well as build out that infrastructure that we are talking about if we're going to maintain our leadership. And we got to talk about how we're going to do that. Somebody said to me, are we going to have to pay to charge electric vehicles? Well, we pay for gas. So yeah, we have to figure out how you're going to do it. How are you going to transform gas stations? Some people don't think about the nitty gritty. They want to take a magic wand and just wave it. Not everybody, people will be putting chargers into the garages to charge overnight. The first fire we have everybody's going to panic. We got to make sure that that's done right. Not everybody has a garage that they can charge overnight. We don't have charging stations at the United States Capitol. So we got to build it out. Are we going to do it at convenience stores? Are we going to do it at grocery stores? All of that's got to be, DOE's got a really big role to play to help all of this play out. And it's going to take collaboration in the Congress and across sectors, which is why I did introduce the USA Electrify Forward Act, as you just discussed, to establish new retooling, manufacturing grants, update our codes, to encourage electric vehicle charges, encourage the production and manufacturing jobs, and require states to deploy those charging stations. But the other thing, Steve, when you talk about jobs, and we've got to make sure we are not leaving behind areas. We've got to make sure we're putting charging stations into that they can afford it. We think about people who don't have garages. I have been at the table for months with the labor unions and the heads of all the major environmentalist groups, bringing people together. So workers in my district, workers around the country are worried that they're going to lose their job. They hear the word green job, they think their job's going away, they're going to make less money. That isn't the case. But we're sitting at the table and everybody wants to it's my UAW workers are getting flooded these last 3 weeks back home by these awful floods. But how do we make sure we're changing and adapting for the economy of the future and keeping those jobs right here in the U.S. and protecting those workers? And that's what I'm working on too.
So what do we do? Because that is a function of lack of trust. And it's why I mentioned your Facebook. Your Facebook. You're trying to explain to people where they're at, what's really going on. And I know, you're one voice. I know you're a big fan of your colleague, Republican Congressman Fred Upton, who I think tries to do similar kinds of things. But I have to say that there's still a fragility out there, that people fear the future, they fear change, and I don't see a lot of people as invested as you are in helping to understand the dynamics of how the transition can be beneficial, how we can do it. What do we do at that micro level with that person so that they know that resources will be there to retrain if needed, or help create that? Because I just sort of wonder where that is. I know you care about it, and I know this wasn't on script, but I would love to kind of hear, Debbie, what we kind of do with that fear that is out there, that lack of trust in the future.
That's what I'm working on every day. We have to be very intentional about this as we create policy. I spend a lot of time talking to UAW workers, IBEW workers. If you're an electrician in this country and we move towards the future, your job is going to be secure, and we're going to be creating lots of new jobs for electricians. What we have to do for the UAW worker is promise them we are going to maintain those jobs here. We have to build those batteries here. Now, there's a lot of, and there's some new studies out that talk about how we will be maintaining the number of jobs that are here. The fact of the matter is, an internal combustion engine requires fewer jobs probably than the building of the battery, but the body that the battery is going to go in is larger and is going to require a different kind of job in the factory as we're building those cars. This gets into really nitty gritty. But those workers have to be part of the discussion, which is what I have been doing with the UAW, putting them at the table, and then they're talking to their membership. And we have to do this, including everybody at the table. This can't be dictated from on high. We got to have everybody at the table having this discussion, developing policies that are, people are always making us choose. We don't have to either choose the environment or choose jobs. We can do both, and that's what we got to work at very intentionally at doing it right now.
One last little tidbit here. This is a wonderful conversation. I interviewed then Vice President Joe Biden in 2016 in about February, well before the presidential race that year. And he said the challenge for the Democratic Party is that many people looked at it as a party of snobs, that a lot of people felt left behind and demeaned and not taken care of. How do we fix? I'd say, how does that Democratic Party fix that? Is it fixing it? Do you think that message is being felt and read differently by Americans today, or do we have a lot more work to do? And I say we as the nation, not we as a Democrat. I happen to be an independent, but I'm just sort of interested in that framing because it seems so prescient with some of the pressures that came that Joe Biden saw. And I'm just wondering if you think that that your party is addressing that now in a real way.
So, Steve, you know that I'm someone that said in 2016 Donald Trump could win the election, and everybody thought I was crazy. But it was because he was talking to workers, and he understood that they had seen trade policy ship their jobs overseas. I have been very blunt with Democrats, as you well know, and others know, that we need to talk about the issues that working people talk about every night at the dinner table. We have to remember there are times that my colleagues get mad at me when I say this. The coastal elites may seem like they're dominating the conversation, but there are a lot of people, a lot of working men and women across this country that need to know we care. I think Joe Biden as president is doing exactly that. He is making sure that we are including working people at the table. You've seen the policies he's undertaken in the American Rescue Plan. And now, as we are developing this infrastructure plan, I'm having a lot of discussions with people at the White House every day. I'm talking to the UAW, other unions every day. And we need to make sure we're communicating with the people that we represent how we are protecting what they care about. And we need to be communicating in plain, simple language. I say to people, our vocabulary matters. But I do think that there's no better person than Joe Biden, who understands the challenges that working men and women face every single day across this country, leading this discussion. And I'm a voice in the Democratic caucus that's trying to remind people of that every day, too.
Well, Representative Debbie Dingell, Senior Whip in the House Democratic Caucus, member of the Energy and Commerce and Natural Resource Committees, and a great friend of the Hill. I want to thank you so much for sharing your candid views as usual. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Steve. Good to have been with you.
And now for a message from our sponsor, the Environmental Defense Fund. Please welcome Vicki Patton, General Counsel and U.S. Clean Air Program Lead with the Environmental Defense Fund. She's in conversation with Melina Kennedy, Vice President of Product Compliance and Regulatory Affairs with Cummins, a major manufacturer headquartered in Indiana. Vicki, over to you.
Melina, these responsibilities put you in really important discussions with our nation's environmental policymakers about solutions to protect human health and the environment for all Americans. Welcome and thank you for this discussion. Cummins has supported clear, protective, and enforceable clean air standards. Can you describe your approach to clean air solutions?
Sure, Vicki, thank you for having me. And just very briefly, for those who may not know Cummins, as you mentioned, we're a U.S. headquartered company based in Indiana. We have over 60,000 employees globally. We've been known historically for advanced diesel technology, although what's exciting is we are in the business of a number of different technologies as well, from battery electric to hydrogen fuel cell, hybrids, et cetera, to help support the vision for a new future of zero emissions. At the heart of our company, to answer your question, we really, we're an innovator. We innovate, and we have long been known, working with partners like EDF, to seek tough, clear, and enforceable regulations that do continue to better the environment. Because our mission for the company is to power a more prosperous world, but for us, prosperous includes serving our communities, our stakeholders, and making the environment better. So that's why we've historically, and will continue, advocate for more stringent emission regulations all the way down to net zero.
Lena, this is a moment as the U.S. recovers from a tragic pandemic, as our nation kind of rolls up its sleeves and works together to address climate change with urgency, as we address injustices and do all we can to eliminate pollution from communities. And as we work together to strengthen manufacturing and create high quality jobs today and for generations to come in manufacturing and creating these zero emitting vehicles and solutions that are at hand. As you take stock of the US landscape, what are the important developments you're focused on as our nation transitions to zero emitting vehicles?
Thanks, Vicki. I would just echo briefly, it is really an exciting time for the world and for the U.S. to embrace continuing to improve the environment, which is what Cummins is about and wants to be a part of. There's a lot going on right now, and the regulatory landscape, we're at a critical moment where we want to see, and we will likely see, new emissions regulations on a nationwide basis as early as 2027 that will help reduce urban pollution, more specifically, perhaps NOx emissions, but also continue to build upon increasingly, or decreasing, I should say, greenhouse gas standards that have already been set in phase 1 and phase 2. And so from Cummins' perspective, as I mentioned, we have an entire business unit dedicated to technologies for the future, hydrogen or hybrid, battery electric, hydrogen fuel cells, et cetera. And even in the difficult 2020 that our country has faced, we have continued to innovate. We're powering electric buses in urban communities. And we are now also even in the electrolyzer business, which is helping produce clean energy, hydrogen, which we think will play a big role in the future of ensuring that our world is a better place. I would also be remiss if I didn't mention that we've launched our own very aggressive global goals to reach net carbon neutrality by 2050. And that's for all of our plants, our facilities, and our operations and products all over the world. So those are very ambitious goals that we are planning to achieve. And so we want the regulations to continue to get better and better all the way down to zero.
Lena, you touched on a number of important issues, and zero emitting vehicles present a really unique opportunity to address smog-forming nitrogen oxides, to help address particulates, climate pollution. At the same time, we save fuel costs for fleets and shippers and truckers, and for all Americans, and strengthen American manufacturing and high quality job creation. As our nation is working together to adopt and put in place the next generation of clean air standards, what are the opportunities you see, and what does that look like?
Well, as I mentioned earlier, we do have a history of advocating proactively for tough, clear, and enforceable standards. As we look to the future and we're excited about and we embrace the future of zero, we think there are several things that are important considerations to make sure this is successful. And Cummins, having been around for over 100 years and serving so many applications, even different applications within heavy duty truck, because there are differences, we really feel we have a good understanding of how can we make our communities and our customers successful in this transition, because it's in no one's interest if the transition isn't successful. So first, I would say having clear enforceable regulations in advance so that companies like Cummins can plan and make sure that we have sufficient time to implement. Secondly, we feel that a path is important. This transition is big. And so if we wait a long time for an immediate light switch, we would worry that that wouldn't be successful for our communities and our customers to adopt. Rather, we'd like to see a path that continually, incrementally improves the environment and gets better and better along the way to eventual zero. And that way we can help make sure that our customers succeed, that our customers and our communities are well equipped to transition, and we don't just wait and turn on a light switch. And most importantly, that we can see some of the environmental benefits sooner rather than later. So we think a variety of technologies will be in play, and that's why we've invested in and are innovating and producing in a number of different technologies for zero and near zero emitting technologies. And we feel that we can keep getting better along the way, all the way down to zero.
Thank you so much for that. Lena, the President and Congress are working on infrastructure investments that are important for all Americans, for American families, and for American manufacturers and innovation and high quality job creation. What are you seeing as our nation kind of rolls up its sleeves and works to kind of move forward with some really important, almost once in a generation investments in our own country in infrastructure?
The infrastructure piece is so essential, and it's really heartening to see the administration and members of Congress take the lead to ensure that we have the right infrastructure to be successful, because we are in a new era. As we look at these new technologies, they do require significant public infrastructure, everything from fueling stations, for example, for hydrogen fuel, to battery electric charging stations for battery electric vehicles, and also things like the commitment to clean the grid. We want to make sure we're looking at the impact of carbon holistically, well to wheel. And so cleaning the grid and ensuring that we are drawing power sources from clean sources of energy, like perhaps even hydrogen, as I mentioned, we're in the electrolyzer business, is really important. And so it's really heartening to see that there is progress and a commitment to ensure that infrastructure is in place so that, again, customers, communities can be successful in adopting these technologies. If we aren't successful in adopting these technologies, we won't share our common vision of improving the environment, which is what we all want.
We do, and we're really grateful to you, Melina, for being with us today and for your commitment to helping to provide these solutions for all Americans. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Vicki. And just briefly, I would like to say thank you so much for your leadership and EDF's leadership. It's an exciting opportunity to help promote the environment, healthier cities and communities, and create jobs, and that's terrific.
Thank you both for that exchange. Now it's time to hear the labor perspective. I'm delighted to be joined by Zoe Lippman, the Director of Manufacturing and Advanced Transportation at the Blue-Green Alliance, a partnership of labor unions and environmental organizations, and John Paul Smith, although I've been given permission, I think, to call him JP, Legislative and Policy Representative from the United Steelworkers. We were just discussing them, the largest private sector union in North America. Welcome to you both. Thank you so much. Zoe, let me just start out with you to kind of take us down and explain the significance of clean technology manufacturing, where it fits. And I don't know if you heard Congresswoman Dingell, but as you talk about it and tell us what it is and how far we have to go to get there, Debbie Dingell said, when her constituents hear the word green, they worry about losing their jobs. So we'll start with you how to fix that, and then we'll jump to JP.
Sure, and I think that's a great lead-in because not only do I think we all know that manufacturing is a critical part of our economy, critical not only to jobs, to R&D, but it has the potential to support millions of family-supporting jobs, but it hasn't always delivered on that promise. And as we're moving into cleaner technologies, whether that's in the energy sector or in this case, in the motor vehicle sector, the car and truck industry, we have an opportunity to, depending on what action we take now, we have an opportunity for this transformation in the vehicle sector to either rebuild and strengthen our manufacturing sector, improve job quality, or if we don't act, risk falling behind the rest of the world and ceding more jobs overseas. We're seeing, these are huge markets. We're seeing countries worldwide moving fast, not only to make their nations leading markets for advanced technology, but to ensure that they're capturing the manufacturing and jobs gains. And now is the time for us to act to do likewise. And I will just say, when we think about the vehicle sector, we're really talking about not only the vehicle assembly sector, but full range of technology, from the components that go into it to the materials and technology that goes into those components. I might punt to JP that he knows that better than anyone, but we have a transformative opportunity to rebuild and strengthen our manufacturing across these sectors as the industry shifts.
Well, thank you. Well, JP, I'll ask you a similar question, but I have to tell you, I have friends, in the green movement who are not as enlightened as where Zoe is, and when they hear the words manufacturing, they hear the words steel workers, they start boiling. And so I'm just wondering, as we talk about, not only this alliance, but actually a big transition in the manufacturing side of, say, e-trucks, which we're discussing today, how deep can we make that alliance? What do we have to do by way of trust building in, between these communities?
Oh, thank you for that. And that's a pretty important aspect for us. Oftentimes we feel like we have a choice to either have good manufacturing jobs or to improve and protect our environment. And the fact is we can actually do both of those. People hear steel workers and they think that we make steel, and we do. We make steel and other basic metals. But also, in particular in this sector, we make rubber and tire and glass and kind of all these various components that go into these, along with, I understand you had Jack Allen from Proterra on the program a little earlier. We actually build the buses and propulsion systems at Proterra for the e-buses. And so I think we can do both. And our union is really committed to doing that, to have sound protective environmental practices, while at the same time having good union manufacturing jobs.
Before I leave you, JP, let me just ask you, as you kind of look at the challenges in manufacturing and the human capital side, the worker side, do we need to invest in training? Is there a different set of skill sets that are needed? Or is it just plug and play? You can come in with what we've got and we don't really need to invest in human capital. What are those transition elements of building a good, solid workforce in the e-truck world?
We absolutely need public investment in training and retooling and building, some of these facilities that are needed. You take today, there's approximately 150,000 workers in our country that make engines and transmissions. And as we go to electrify the transportation sector or have lower emissions across the transportation sector, we kind of have a choice here. We can either grasp this new technology, train workers, retool factories, or we can let our foreign competitors just dominate this market share. And so while we have to balance, the diminishing market share of ICE or internal combustion engine vehicles, at the same time we can grasp this new technology. And so we're trying to be really forward-looking here while we know that our workers can do this work. When American workers are trained, they can compete with anyone in the world. And so we really need public investment in retooling and retraining our workers.
Zoe, this may be an unfair, kind of out of left field question, but I remember that the United States was the leader at one point in solar panel, development, production, R&D. The national labs were involved too. We'll look at that ecosystem of R&D and creation of a very important renewable sector. You could also go to wind, which has much more high tech in it than people understand and know. Europe and the United States were key there. But China, not to demonize in any sense, invested heavily in these areas and arguably began dumping in many areas in solar. So they were basically, subsidizing huge R&D then in the industry. And so it made it very, very hard for U.S. producers to survive in that area. And there are almost no major producers of solar that I know of, of the cells and whatnot in the U.S. They're abroad or in China or elsewhere. How do we avoid this story being like that we're getting, the Green-Blue Alliance, we're focusing on e-truck transition, we're looking at infrastructure coming in. How do we get to a point where we look at this as a critical industry and a critical national priority that needs a response so that other global competitors don't engage in the same kind of dumping and kind of pernicious competition, if you will?
Yeah, that's a wonderful question. The short answer is we have the tools we need. We need to act now on a comprehensive strategy, not only to lead in these technologies, whether it's offshore wind, whether it's solar, whether it's in the next generation of clean and electric vehicles, and also to ensure that we are acting to, as JP mentioned, onshore production of the key components. This is be a huge issue in offshore wind or in solar, as much as it is in the EV propulsion system technologies, that we're aiding companies to convert the production they have now to build technologies of the future, that we're providing additional opportunities to strengthen our manufacturing communities and build supply chains. But in addition, we want to ensure that as we invest in infrastructure or provide tax credits for new technology, that we are simultaneously incentivizing strengthening our domestic manufacturing sector, building greater domestic content in our products, and ensuring high quality jobs. And that's and that we think about the situation that you described. We've seen declines in manufacturing, lost jobs, declining labor standards, not by accident, but as a result of a whole range of, as you mentioned, trade and tax and other policies. We have the opportunity now to fix those policies to ensure that we don't see those kinds of losses, but even better, that we actually rebuild these industries, transform, ensure that these new technologies come with a new generation of good jobs, and for that matter, benefits to manufacturing communities and workers at the same time.
Thank you. I've got a couple of questions in the audience which I want to get into, but I want to squeeze in one quick one to JP. Quite a while back, a year back or so, I interviewed former Secretary of Energy Ernie Moniz, and he has a group called the Energy's Future Coalition, I think. And in it, he had proposed a big idea. Let's have an energy jobs coalition. Let's take advances in new green energies. That could be grid. That could be whole different things. It could be e-vehicles and e-trucks and e-infrastructure. But it was not just in terms of the the revolution that we needed in terms of infrastructure was also built around not just jobs, but giving people a new tangible appreciation for the transition in energy in the country. I was very taken by it. As we look at the infrastructure bill, and we have, a question, about where, all of this sits within the infrastructure bill and reconciliation bill, whether these issues, are part of that, are part of those deals. But JP, I wonder whether or not, as we talk about this with such specificity, that specific set of contracts exists really in the infrastructure bill, or do you worry that the worker, that these plans can be kind of washed away over time? What's your sense of where things are, JP? I know you do this every day.
So with any new technology, there's going to be apprehension among workers, and to make that existing technology work, and our members are not immune to that, or workers across America are not immune to that. And our union has worked closely with Secretary Granholm and her staff over Department of Energy, and we take an approach that our goals are achievable if we work together. And Zoe mentioned, public funding to help existing companies and new companies work in this space, and we would agree with that. But with that help, we would expect strong labor standards, so that they're not just good jobs, good union jobs, but that these are family-sustaining jobs. People can produce this new technology, this new energy, while also having good wages, good benefits, and stay in their community and really pull the community and the environmental groups and labor together.
Well, thank you for that. We're just about out of time, but I want to give one quick question here to Michael Dubois from Twitter. Asked, given the long recharge time, should we build stations that replace batteries with fully charged batteries or traditional charging stations? It's just a good question. I don't know. Do either of you have thoughts on what we should do by way of thinking of charging strategies? Zoe?
I guess I would say we're bound to see all kinds of innovation out here, but it's critical that whether we go with charging stations, whether we go with batteries, that we're doing everything we can to ensure that the pieces that go into them are made in the U.S., that we're ensuring that we're building good jobs in every part of the transportation supply chain, not just in manufacturing, but in the installation of charging stations, in the driving we do, et cetera.
Well, great. Well, we will leave it there today. This is a wonderful conversation. I hope to have you. Good luck with the Blue-Green Alliance. I guess you folks talk together a lot, but thank you very much. Zoe Littman, Director of Manufacturing and Advanced Transportation at the Blue-Green Alliance, and John Paul Smith, Legislative Representative at the United Steelworkers. Thank you both so much for sharing your thoughts today.
Thank you.
Thanks.
My final guest is David Senjem, a Republican state senator from Minnesota who chairs the Senate's Energy and Utilities Finance Committee. He's a vocal advocate for the need for clean energy legislation and supports EV charging infrastructure. State Senator Senjem, it's great to see you. Thank you so much for joining us. I have to say, when I was looking over your profile, I was sort of surprised. You're kind of the Johnny Appleseed of EV stuff out in Minnesota. And from what I've read, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, yes, you've significantly shifted the aperture of your own party on these issues in ways that were not the case before you were doing these roles. Is that a fair characterization?
Well, thank you, first of all, for the opportunity to be on this program today. I don't know. I'm going to let it to other people. Other people have to decide that. I think it's just about seeing the future and going there. And to the extent I can pull people along with me, that's certainly what I want to do within my party. I think our party needs to see this future as well. And I'm picking up the torch, and I'm really kind of trying to, if you will, yes, take us there, I suppose. But people will come at their own pace, and we'll just try to accelerate that a little bit.
Well, it's reverberated here in a way that people have noticed. But, I like to, we're all storytellers. I'm a storyteller. A lot of people are storytellers. And, sometimes stories are very binary. There are villains in the story and there are heroes in the story. But in the story of this, when you kind of look at what's in the way of getting to the kind of EV world, particularly in trucking, that you are interested in seeing deployed in MEA. What are the deficits in policy? What are the deficits in partnerships or vision? What do we have to fix to get to the future you are advocating?
Well, I think it's to some level of confidence, and I think if we're talking about the electric truck, if you will, I think it's just the engineering and do it. I don't believe these are necessarily complex things in terms of putting together. We've not quite gotten there. Well, we do have a new flyer of school bus manufacturing company in St. Cloud, Minnesota. Again, they have done it. It works, and those buses are across the country. Why not a truck? So I mean, I'm not necessarily hung up in terms of can we do it or not. We can do it. We're smart people. We can engineer and manufacture these devices that become the components of these trucks in this case. So I think it's just a matter of a transition. I think we're in this transition. We're moving that direction. It may be, who knows, a 10 or 20 year transition, but I think you come back around 2035 and you will see not a lot of fossil fuel trucks on the highways. They'll be either electrified or hydrogen.
It's fascinating because you describe it. I mean, I sort of look at this as not an everyday topic for me, but I look at it as a strategic leap. You're describing it as, hey, we've already made a lot of increments along the way. That we're, this is sort of step by step where we're going and we're going to be. So, maybe when I come back, to this topic, everyone, it seems like we're having bigger leaps, but you've described it as pretty incremental steps.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, the battery technology will advance. We know that. The rest of it's electronics. Minnesota, for instance, we're a medical device state. We lead actually the country in terms of the manufacturing of medical devices. Well, that's just componentry, whether it's a medical device or whether it's a washing machine or refrigerator. These are all electronics, and you assemble electronics, you create the motors, and we know how to make electric motors. That's not new technology. We just have to engineer it and assemble it.
We have a question from our audience, Ann Feldhusen, who's an advisor for the Chambers for Innovation and Clean Energy. And since you talked about St. Cloud and some of the things you're doing, and she asks, what can cities do to attract a manufacturer or jobs to their location in these areas? I think it's an interesting question of, what can be done to pre-position or to sort of think about how communities, cities, I talk with mayors all the time, can actually change their align interests, and so to speak, so they can become attractive to new investment in this area.
Well, it's whether or not you're looking for electric manufacturing, truck manufacturing company, or whether you're looking for IBM. You just have to create that local environment, and that's a lot about tax structure. It's a lot about tax increment financing out here in Minnesota. It's just a lot about the kind of city you are. And people want to locate new companies in cities that are vibrant and certainly have a workforce that is ready and able. And to that extent, I think you have to, whether it's through community technical colleges or whatever, you have to have that on hand and have it available for people. But I think companies come to the place where they think they can be the most successful, and that is by and large a good community with a workforce.
It's been very interesting to me over the last several years how much innovation and investment in the green space, you will, of electrification. There was, despite, I think I can be honest, there was not a lot of federal enthusiasm, White House enthusiasm for this. But if you look down at states, you look down at cities, look at the local and state community, lots of innovation in this area percolating in different designs. And so my question to you is, when you hear about things like the infrastructure bill, do you need them? Are they aligned with the course that you think is important for the state of Minnesota? Or do you think the federal government needs to hear a little bit on how they need to tweak what they're doing so it does align with the innovation and investments you're making in the state?
Well, I'm a states' rights guy. I think states and local community can figure this much better out than certainly the federal government. If they want to give us money, fine, we'll take it and we'll spend it as wisely as possible. But by and large, the ingenuity of this country comes out of local communities and certainly states. And In Minnesota, for instance, we have an alliance with Germany. 7 of our cities are aligned in what we call a climate smart municipality group. And we talk about these kind of issues constantly with our German counterparts. And how are they doing it? How are we going to do it? We've got little groups up in the Twin City areas that I actually sponsor that get together monthly and talk about the future and innovation and how to get there. We're going to do it ourselves out in Minnesota. We're going to make it work, and I would suspect other states generally feel the same way. Pride of ownership, perhaps. Federal government's nice, but just give us the money and we'll figure it out.
I can hear the enthusiasm in that. Let me just finally, David, I'm interested in your constituents, right? And as they think about what's going on in the world, are they excited by this topic? Are they excited about the possibilities? Do you go out and have to help bridge, that? When part of the tension we've been talking to today is, some people fear the future, some people, are worried about that, and maybe this show may help educate them a little bit. But I'm just interested in how your constituents that you talk to across the state and in your own district are looking at the aspiration on e-trucks and whether or not they look at this as a net positive in the long run for them.
Oh, I think, and we're talking about the totality of things, whether it's e-trucks, e-cars, or the whole issue of climate or emissions or whatever it might be. I think generally speaking, if you talk about a better world, a cleaner world, earthly stewardship is what I frankly emphasize as I talk about it. We have this great Mother Earth, but it's going to have to be used by people well into the future. And as a moral obligation, I think we all have a responsibility, frankly, to do what little we can to take care of it for, who knows, thousands of years into the future. We can't use it up. We can't produce oil or coal or anything else fast enough to produce our energy going off into thousands of years beyond. So we've got to figure this out technologically. We can. We've got wind, we have sun, and they can make energy, and we can make it work.
I loved this conversation with you. I really appreciate your candor and your vision, enthusiasm. Sometimes it's hard to find out there, so we got to have you back. But I want to thank Senator David Senjem, who is the chairman of the Senate Energy and Utilities Finance and Policy Committee in Minnesota, Republican from southeastern Minnesota. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
That brings us to the end of our program today. A very big thank you to the Environmental Defense Fund for its support of these conversations and to all of you attendees for joining our discussions. For any of you who missed this, we're going to have this video up from our event up on our website shortly. You can see it all there again. I'm Steve Clemens. Have a great day. Be well.